Hello, I'm Bill O'Donnell, and welcome to another program on spirituality. Today in the studio, you're in for a thrill. We have a honest-to-goodness Taoist master here, Taoist master, to teach us a little about Taoism. And to that end, we have former resident of Santa Fe, Bruce Kumar Frantzis, in the studio. Welcome, Bruce.
Welcome.
You know, to meet this guy, you can't help but love him. You know, he's, of course, you never want to make him mad because they can, you know, take you out at any time. But I want to acknowledge my friend Greg Gardner of Kansas, of Maui, who introduced us, and also to bring us back with Paul Shapiro, his assistant today in this production. So, welcome back to Santa Fe.
Glad to be back.
Okay, you lived here back in the...
From 87 to 89. Okay. I had a school in Santa Fe.
What was the name of the school?
At that time, we just called it an Age Institute, which was the name of my institute in Colorado before.
Oh, okay. Tell the folks at home who don't know much about the Tao what it is, and say how it contrasts to, say, Judeo-Christian spirituality or context.
Well, from Judeo-Christian perspective, I come from a family of bishops and archbishops for 1,000 years.
We were major Eastern Orthodox?
Greek Orthodox. We were major figures in that particular church. The Tao is China's original religion. It predates Buddhism. And most people in the West think the two are pretty much the same thing because they're just Eastern religions. They don't know anything about Eastern religions. Mm-hmm. And they are similar in some points, but the practices of Taoism in general, everything goes in terms of health, whether it be physical health or emotional or mental or psychic or karmic health, as a Buddhist would put it, or the health of your essence. So they look at spirituality essentially as people are either spiritually healthy, spiritually unhealthy, they're awake or they're asleep, they're natural or they're unnatural.
Mm-hmm. How did you get attracted to this in the first place, from Greek Orthodox to Taoism? How did that happen?
Well, I was involved with martial arts and healing and meditation from the age of 12. For example, in 1963, I did my first 2-week Zen retreat, and then I started learning shiatsu when I was treating people at the age of 14, you know, getting paid for it even. And I began martial arts in 61, so going through this whole progression. As a child between the ages of 6 and 12, I was effectively doing the method of India's meditation that comes from Ramana Maharshi, which is called neti, neti, neti. Then I chose to go to Japan to go to school, to go to college because
At what age?
18. So I got up on a plane in 1967 and I just went to Japan. No, I didn't know Japanese. No, I didn't know a living soul when I got there. I just decided that's what I wanted to do and I went there. And then the next year I went to Taiwan, where I met a very famous Chinese master, and some things happened. And then, long story short, I had never heard of Taoism. And the next thing I was being asked if I would like to join a major Taoist group that was rather secretive in Taiwan. And over the next 7 years, I became a Taoist priest and went through their priest training.
Well, that's great. Listen, I think to give you guys a better understanding, I want you to see a piece of Taoist energy arts, which Bruce has kindly and generously provided for this channel that will air in its entirety if it hasn't already. And we'll take a short look at the introduction to this. I think it will give you a better overview of what all this man is capable of doing. So, Marshall, if you'll roll one, we'll see what it looks like.
Qigong and the 3 internal martial arts of Tai Chi, Xingyi and Bagua were developed in ancient China as a means of increasing a person's life energy by a combination of movement, relaxing the body and stilling the mind. More than 100...
Give you just a flavor. We couldn't hear it in the studio, but all those different modalities under Taoism, what did we see? Health, meditation, Tai Chi, what else?
Well, in Taoism in general, there are many, many branches of it. There are the branches that are intellectual nature, things like feng shui, where it's about mental calculations, but then there are what they call personal practices. And the personal practices are what make a person healthy, or that you learn the methods of how to heal other people, because you have to personally be able to do it, or else you learn to become a good martial artist, or else you learn to, shall we say, learn how to meditate till you wake up.
But you had already studied meditation and yoga before you went to Japan?
Before I went to Japan, I studied both. I studied both yoga and Zen meditation. And as I said, I did an Indian method of meditation from the age of 6 till I was 12.
And after Japan, I understand you went to China, is that correct?
Yeah, during the next years, without going into when and when, I would be there for a certain number of years, and I would come back for a year, and I would go back. But basically, I spent 11 years in China.
Again, not knowing the language, but learning it when you got there?
Yep, right on the ground. That was it. Didn't know, I mean, knew like maybe 2 words before I arrived,
Yeah. And what was the name of your primary teacher there?
Well, it depends what years. In my early years, Wang Xujing and Hong Yixiang were my 2 big Xingyi and Bagua teachers. I studied with a man in the United States called Titi Liang, as well as in Taiwan, who was a student of Zheng Menqing, one of his main students. And I studied with Yang Xiaozhong, who was the son of Yang Chengfu, which is in the Yang style of Tai Chi. That's pretty much where 90% of all the Yang style Tai Chi you'll see in the West comes from.
Okay, we also have a clip of you with one of your teachers in China, which I think would give people a better idea of some of the training.
This is what I consider to be my main teacher, who I studied with for 3.5 years between 81 and 86. He was a master of the Wu style Tai Chi, as well as a master of many, many, many other things, as well as in China in meditation what they call an immortal, a spiritual immortal. That means he was a living Buddha.
What would that mean? Give a little more example.
A living Buddha would be the equivalent of a living Jesus Christ.
This man?
Yeah.
What were his particular gifts that you experienced with him?
Gifts?
Well, how did he manifest that he was another living Jesus Christ?
Well, if a person has never actually spent the time to be around enlightened people, then some of that might not make a whole lot of sense. They just have, shall we say, a vibe that is different from a normal human being, different from a bishop or the Pope. It's a little bit more.
Okay.
And the other side of it is that, I mean, I saw him do some, shall we say, what people in the West would call miracles, but I don't want to talk about that because there's no need.
Okay, but you saw them.
I saw them.
Okay. Let's take a look at that particular clip with you training with your master in China.
Like no other Westerner, Bruce Kumar Frantzis has devoted his life to the study of China's ancient internal energy technologies. He specialized in the development of Qi, internal energy, which is the secret of the formidable healing and self-defense powers of the internal martial arts. He is able to demystify Qi development in a way that is understandable and accessible to the average person in plain English. It's his hope that Tai Chi, Qigong and Taoist meditation can bring the West a future of health, strength and well-being.
Tell us, what do you remember of him as your teacher?
Well, I had many teachers, I said before that. I mean, I'd been studying martial arts from the age of 12. I didn't meet him until I was well into my 30s. He was, I would say a couple of things. I would say he was the most intelligent teacher I ever had. I would also say that he was the clearest, and he also was the strongest. And I would say this also having studied with the founder of Aikido, Morihei Ueshiba, for a couple of years. So it's very, I mean, he was tiny. I mean, he was like about 5'2", maybe weighed 110 pounds. But he could play with me like I was a baby, and I'm not that easy to play with.
That's great. So when did you come back to this country and start to teach?
Well, after the 3.5 years in Beijing, that was pretty straight. I came back in 1987. I came to Santa Fe, and I opened up a school. And by the time I left here, I had about 200 students.
Tell us about your experience here, because in this particular DVD, which I can strongly recommend, you taught some notable people from Santa Fe, but I was particularly impressed with your work at the state penitentiary after the big riot in 1980. Can you remember a little about that experience?
Oh, that's pretty easy to remember. One of my students was, anyway, he became friends with the prison priest, and I guess like a pen pal or whatever you call it with a prisoner inside. The prison priest asked me if I would go teach in the prison, so I went there. And originally it was supposed to be that, you know, there would be tests done just to show that this could actually make a difference in the prison system. So we had people like, well, we just had people getting over their diseases. Bear's heart, the guy who's big guy, his heart shrunk, and we had, but inside that particular class, we had all the prison, not all of them, but a lot of the prison gang leaders. Everybody in my class, except for one, was a murderer. He just shot someone, the guy just didn't die, so he didn't murder him, but, you know, he did shoot him. But what happened was that 4 times I got asked, because one time when I was teaching, there was a gang war brewing. And so I worked with the people, and like, it chilled out. And so 3 more times I got asked, and every single time the guard asked me, it turned out that it apparently chilled out the particular gang war, because they were in my class. Now, whether I did it or whether it was just pure serendipity, I'll just, what can I say?
If it lowers the recidivism rate, we love you. You know, that kind of a thing. I think that the average citizen would say that. But you have no idea then. You must, in your interactions with these guys that had nothing else to do really most of the time, what was your experience? What were the benefits, or lead us into the benefits of Taoism?
This is where it was very simple. Almost everybody in that place was sick. They had, oh my God, I mean, everything, every disease you can possibly imagine. I mean, prisons are not healthy places. And a lot of them just plain got a lot better. I mean, like one person who had an enlarged heart, it shrunk back. And people with like mega high blood pressures, you know, went back down to normal where they had been like off the Richter scale. There were people with various and sundry diseases. Now, Tai Chi specifically was the national health exercise of China, and it is known as something that just heals disease. Now, ordinary Tai Chi heals it to a certain degree. I also studied the medical lineages about how it came out of Qigong, which is one of the branches of Chinese medicine. So I'm able to apply that when I teach.
Talk about a little more about the health benefits of practicing Tai Chi primarily. What in the movements we can show? We showed you doing some of the movements, but what other things have people reported in their own health being affected by
there are a
practicing?
number of things. If you talk about just a few simple tests that have been done in the West, they've shown that it increases balance, which is a big thing for older people, so they don't fall down and break their hips, and they usually die afterwards. Then you have the issue that it absolutely lowers blood pressure, but does something more than that. It actually dramatically improves blood circulation. And as people age, it's actually how well your blood circulates determines the quality of life you have. For example, there's another student I had, was named Dave Fine, who was here. He had Parkinson's, and you know, I remember the first day he came in and was like, you know, his hand, and then he thanked me one day because he could actually write, and that was like a big deal. And he started progressively getting better and better and better. And I only taught him ordinary Qigong and Tai Chi. It wasn't like I worked on him personally, because when I was in China, I was also a Qigong doctor, and I worked on 10,000 patients. But when I was here in Santa Fe, I worked on a few people. One guy named Peter, for example, he couldn't walk, basically. He was in a wheelchair almost all the time because he got bit by some sort of things in the water in Africa, you know, and it's like, it wasn't good for him, as the phrase goes. So there were all sorts of things like that. Tai Chi is particularly known for physical rehab. The Veteran Administration has used it to help people with extreme PTSD. For example, I have one student, Lee, who wrote a book, A Soldier's Heart, and he was a major figure in the Vietnam War in the sense of PTSD. And he was an assassination squad leader. And it basically chilled him out and made him so he could live a life. So you can take it from the nervous system. Every test that's ever been done shows in terms of stress release, physical rehab, healing you from car accidents, of, you know, your body just being smashed to pieces for whatever, you know, event did it. It's wonderful for people of any sort of liver diseases, for actually getting their liver to start functioning again. It really is wonderful for the hepatitis hangover. It personally saved my life when I was in India and I had hepatitis, and I had a doctor standing right next to me saying, you know, you're going to be dead soon. And I reached a point, okay, but there's a certain feeling you get when the life is leaving your body. I got up, I did Tai Chi next to the bed. I had to open up the energy channels in my body, which is painful because the basic rule is when your Qi doesn't flow, you get pain, you get disease. When your Qi flows, you don't have pain, you don't have disease. And it was pretty horrendous, and I slept for a couple of days, but I didn't die, which was like a plus.
So you actually got off your bed, your deathbed, so to speak, and started doing Tai Chi, and it saved your life. That's fascinating. Well, you mentioned Dave Fine, who's an old friend of mine, and he had a wonderful restaurant here for many years. I think people remember Dave's place at the Design Center. I'm trying to think of the name of it. Healthy Days. Healthy Days. I ate there regularly. And so let's run a little clip of Dave's testimony, his experience after working with Bruce.
Well, my name is David Fine, and I'm a Parkinson's patient. I've been studying Tai Chi and Qigong with Kumar for about a year. It's offered me quite a bit of relief. Some of the symptoms of Parkinson's are a tremor, loss of balance, loss of memory, drooling, stumbling, things like that. It's really helped a lot. You know, my balance is not a problem anymore at all. I can make a fist with my right hand, which I never used to be able to do. My handwriting is pretty good. I've still got the disease, but I think that I actually have a chance of getting over it. But I can say for a fact that I'm better than I was a year ago, and that is not supposed to happen.
As the post-war baby boom.
Well, good to see Dave again. I haven't seen him in a while, but tell us more about that health aspect. I mean, that's pretty significant testimony.
When China had the Cultural Revolution. Well, basically after the Communist Revolution, they killed half of their doctors, and another half of the ones who were left went into hiding, because at that point to be educated made you a running dog bourgeoisie, and that was not good for your health, as in you get killed. And what happened was that they made Tai Chi the national health exercise of China. Qigong wasn't, but Mao Zedong liked Tai Chi. And as an example, this is where I really kind of got just how powerful it was. The person who originally taught me acupuncture, he was a surgeon in Tianjin. And he used to have 400 people in his surgery coming in, right? He was a doctor, 400 people. You can't treat 400 people, no way, no how. What they used to do is have people say, I can't treat you. If we were triaging, decide you weren't going to die within a month, they'd make you go to a Tai Chi teacher, and you had to have a card stand for 3 months that you were there every day, otherwise you couldn't see a doctor again. You know, they're somewhat draconian there. So the fact of the matter is that 95% of the people who went with something that was not, you're going to die next week, they just got over it. So as a medical thing, it's amazing the sheer range of diseases Tai Chi deals with. Everything from internal organs to the nervous system. It's not just motor abilities. It's, you know, as if Dave Fine had Parkinson's, that's not supposed to get cured. The thing is that when you start working with Qi and Chinese medicine, you start coming up with a lot of things Western medicine said is not going to work. But these things have worked for thousands of years, and they work today too.
That brings to this book, speaking of Qi, The Qi Revolution, Harness the Healing Power of Your Life Force. This is one of your new books, right?
Yeah, that's my 7th book.
7th book.
And that one was made to be kind of a general introduction for the average person to get some idea of what it's about. And it has some simple exercise, and it talks about meditation at the end. Yeah. And the other book you have down there, The Tao of Letting Go, is very specifically a book that teaches the meditation method of Lao Tzu, the original meditation method of Taoism. And it's particularly useful for people I mean, essentially, most people use it. We have a whole series of tapes with it, too, about, I mean, how you realistically deal with real stress. I mean, you have fear, you have anger, you have agendas. People have died in your life. You've lost everything, all that, you know, which is pretty common these days. But the fact is that this just gives the very basic method, and we also have a series of tapes that takes you through it, like just sit down and do the thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I encourage people to watch the credits. Their website is www.energyarts.com, www.energyarts.com, and you can find all these. And the last one we have here is the Taoist breathing for Qigong and meditation. Tell us about this one.
When I got my PhD in health sciences, I was asked, because the person who was my advisor, his friend was in Clinton's health, the whole committee they had about health, and so he said, okay, now, so you've done a thing in health sciences. What is the one thing that you would do for the American public? And what I said is, I would teach them how to breathe well. Now, the AMA says that 90% of all Americans breathe badly, which is they all think they breathe well. No, even the doctors say it, but they're just only talking about people breathing with their diaphragm. Taoist breathing goes way beyond that, where it actually changes the entire flow inside your whole body. It gets the fluids to flow better inside your body. It's better for your internal organs. So that's the one thing I would do. This thing is a very clear way. You not just get how it works, but actually has the whole routine about, okay, now practice, like listen and just do it. And I think that's a pretty valuable thing. But breath is the lead-in eventually to being able to recognize the Qi inside your body. So it's a bit like discussing the iron ore or the gold. Mm-hmm. Gold, you have dirt and then you have the gold. Well, breathing is effectively the dirt, but if you get far enough in that, then you start getting the gold out of it. And that's where Tai Chi, etc., is quite something. And the one last thing I'd like to say is that in China they have things that are called lineages. They've been passed down. A lineage is, I guess, in a simple Western way, the equivalent of a PhD or a postdoc in something. Most of the Tai Chi that's taught actually doesn't know all the classical Qigong methods that go with it. I worked on 10,000 patients when I was a Qigong doctor, so I know it, but in the stuff, at least that I teach, I try and really get out what the medical side of it is. And with the health crisis we have, it's a lot better to take care of yourself. It's a lot better to prevent yourself getting sick than to have to deal with what happens when you do. And a major emphasis on Taoism, besides its ability to cure diseases, and that is absolutely unrefuted, it's also that if you can prevent yourself from getting sick physically, that's very good. And then if you move into the realm of meditation, how to make yourself completely emotionally, mentally, and psychically healthy. I think that without going into enlightenment and all that kind of jazz, just the sheer fact of, do you have a practical way to get rid of your stress, and a practical way to make your emotions smooth, and a practical way to get your mind to really work well, and to actually deal with, shall we say, what's on the other side that most people who really know about it don't like to casually chat about.
But as a former high school teacher, it sounds like we have a long way to go in our what we call physical education.
I would say that the Tao, this is, yes, first of all, I would say yes. And here's a big thing where these arts of Qi are dramatically different. Western physical education is basically about muscles and better blood circulation. But this sort of stuff is also about blood circulation, all fluid circulation, but it's also about the nervous system, how you train the nervous system to work as well or better than your muscles. Now, I would posit this. 100 years ago, the phrase was strong back, weak mind. People use their muscles. Today, people use their mind. And the giant stress we're getting, or computers, etc., is shredding people's nervous systems. The classic example I use is that if you had people, let's say in India, and these like really poor farms and they're working like 12 hours a day, they go home and they make love with their wife a lot. And that's one of the reasons why they got so many kids, okay? You take people nowadays who only have to work 8 or 9 hours in front of a computer, and for all this talk, they actually don't even have sex very much. Why? Because their nervous system's shot. That is the physical education that I think Taoism can bring into the West. And I believe it's very timely because we've now entered the electronic age. And the electronic age shreds people's nervous systems. It doesn't shred your muscles, it shreds your nerves.
Have you had any success? I mean, we saw what your success, and this video will tell success in the prisons. What about in education? Have you invited anywhere? Have you seen any movement in that direction to incorporate some of this in the education system?
Every time I've tried to do something, all I've met is massive resistance. Most of the people I know who teach Tai Chi and Qigong and things like that have met massive resistance simply because as soon as any new paradigm tries to enter, it goes through 3 phases. It's a lie, it's nonsense, it's absolute garbage. Then the next phase is, well, maybe there's something to one, and then it goes, oh, we knew about it all the time, so we've always done. We're in the middle now where there's becoming the recognition, well, there might be something in it, but not enough to start pushing it where there's movement toward finding out what it really can do. But this is quite normal because when you talk about cross-cultural transference, I think you have to figure at least 100 or 200 years is going to be necessary before the transition occurs. And then everybody says, well, we know it all the time. We've always known this.
But your experience with teaching with young kids, I noticed in watching the video, there were some kids in there, or for your own kids. Are kids drawn to it naturally?
I think kids are drawn first to the more exciting stuff. As long as it's exciting, it gives away their hormones to go crazy. Usually, it's very, very hard to teach things like Tai Chi and Bagua and very developed forms of Qigong to kids below the age of 14, only because we're living in an ADD culture. We're living in a place where people simply have never learned how to develop concentration. But if you would like your children to develop the concentration you would like them to have, and the kind that will serve them for their whole life, and to learn to deal with stress, then if your kid can learn Tai Chi or Bagua, it's great. It's the greatest gift a parent can give. I say that having 2 children of my own.
And did you teach them as kids, or where do they learn it? Who knows?
My own kids are lazy. I mean, that's, you know, now they're picking up on it, and one of my kids is picking up enough that he's practicing all the time. He's learning to become a Chinese doctor.
How about in relationships? I imagine a lot of people come to you and they're interested in helping their own lives, but also they're in relationship with other people. How has it affected your life with your wife or other people that you've seen in relationship?
If anybody's insides are dysfunctional, ragged out, or just jittery and anxious prone, I think you can say that the vast majority of time they have bad relationships. Taoism, just like Confucianism in China, is a very big thing about human relationships. And so I would say that as people become more relaxed, and the whole major thing in Taoism is becoming relaxed, not tense. The whole major thing of Western culture is becoming tense, not relaxed. That as people become more relaxed inside, that usually results in better relationships.
I realize we have one more clip. I hope we have time for it. Marshall, why don't you run that last clip to show Bruce in action one more time?
This is martial arts, yeah.
This is more martial arts.
Bagua is the rarest and most beautiful looking of the internal martial arts, not to mention the most rigorous and the hardest to learn. It was first taught a century ago by Dong Hai Chuan, who would only say he learned it from a Taoist hermit in the mountains. Bagua has many unusual movements derived from the I Ching, Book of Changes. The basic practice method is walking in a circle, and then one begins very fast, multi-directional changes. Bagua's motions involve a tremendous amount of turning in the joints, which has to be developed by having already done something like Xingyi, Tai Chi, Kung Fu, dance or yoga. Bagua uses both hard, known as yang, and soft, known as yin, internal energy. Here Mr. Frantzis is demonstrating yang Bagua methods. Bagua is a superlatively effective martial art, as well as a comprehensive health system. Here Mr. Frantzis demonstrates Bagua at the first U.S. Tai Chi tournament, held in Winchester, Virginia in July 1988. He was a judge at the tournament. His opponent here is Sam Masich, who was the overall first-place champion at the contest. Everything was completely spontaneous, as they had never met before the championship.
Well, that was an impressive piece. Tell us a little about that, and then your comment off camera was that you had broken your back prior to that exhibition?
Yeah, in 82, and actually near Taoism, my back was broken going off on black ice, flying up in the air, hitting a boulder and jackknife up into the air. And I went back to China, and the teacher you saw on a previous clip, he showed me how to fix my back. So this is like a person who's recovering from his back having been broken. No, that was at a national Tai Chi championship. That person was the national thing, and we had never, I just said, okay, just do whatever you want. I said, go ahead. Enjoy yourself, try and take me out. And then I just did whatever I did. The end where you saw where it stopped like that is that I took him, and you just could feel the way his body was going. If I had thrown him, his shoulder would have smashed on the wood floor and would have been broken, so I just held him up. I mean, there's no point to have.
He looked impressed with the whole thing.
You have to ask him.
Well, anyhow, in the few minutes that we have left, what would you like to say? First of all, I want to remind people to go to the website, www.energyarts.com, and that'll be and to find out more information about that or pick up any of his books or materials, I guarantee you'll find it interesting. Okay, we've got a minute or two left. What would you like to say to the people out there?
I would say that since I've come back from China in 1987, I've been focusing on teaching. We have a couple of hundred instructors running around. The one who's in Santa Fe currently is Bob Tangora. But my work is progressing through three basic phases. The first one is more what this particular clips you were showing was about. They use the term body, energy, spirit. So the body means the energy that has to do with the body. The second one is the energy, which is the phase I'm in now, is the energy which has to do not only with the body, but also with the emotions, the entire mental sphere, and the psychic realm. And so that's kind of what I'm in. And I have to get through teaching all that stuff, which could take 10 years, and then I move on to the section of spirit, which is where, shall we say, we start going beyond. We go to subjects of karma and essence, things which eventually cross the life-death barrier.
Well, it's great to have you. Welcome back to Santa Fe. I hope it won't be so long next time you come back to visit, and hope you'll visit us and bring some more of that energy with you.
I also have one other person in this town who was an old student of mine, Paul Shapiro, and he's a well-known artist in town and a very good healer. And we also studied with the same teacher, T.T. Liang, back in the 70s where we first met each other, and he's another great person for people here to contact.
All right, great. Good to have Paul with us as well in the studio. So we've run out of time, but I want to thank Bruce for coming and sharing some of this. I encourage you to go to the website and get some of this material. And I also want to thank our director, Marshall, our help, George in the back, technical, our camera people, Joseph and Alana, and all of you for viewing. And please watch next week at this time for another program on spirituality.